be cautious. I told you going to the urologist carries with it great risk. If the primary tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. The urologists are quick to move to biopsy. Why? Because it is their standard of care. The question needs to be asked, why are we biopsying in the first place? Is the idea that we can somehow predict the future by the present? That's nonsense. The Gleason score is semi-useless when it comes to making decisions about how to manage your prostate. It is unneeded, misleading, and oftentimes wrong. Is it dangerous to see a urologist for an elevated PSA? Now think about that. It is, in fact, the routine of medicine. You got a high PSA, your family doctor's worried, sends you to the urologist. It makes sense on the surface. A urologist is a specialist in the anatomy of the urogenital tract, from the bladder through the prostate. It makes sense, but it doesn't really add up. When you look at how things flow, there is a distinct risk of harm being done by just floating down that path. I'm not knocking urologists or urology. I was very grateful for the doctor who took care of my kidney stone. He was a urologist. That was a high use of his skill set. But prostate cancer, and in particular PSA, is an entirely different animal. And my concern about you going into that den is that you're going to get sucked up on the conveyor belt that is the current standard of care for dealing with an elevated PSA. So the risk is simply 1980s medicine being imposed in, what year are we now? 20, 25, 26. Look, the point being, we're still treating an elevated PSA quite similar to the manner we did 50 years ago. Back then, we had no PSA. Back then, we had no MRI. Back then, we had no PET scanning. Back then, we didn't know what we know now. The prostate biopsy became entrenched as a standard of care. Doctors built their practice around it. Companies made little needles, not little needles, harpoons, to biopsy the prostate. The research delved into how can we biopsy the prostate better? Can we target it more accurately? Maybe we'll get an MRI for the purpose of targeting the biopsy. Stop the madness already. This is ridiculous, in my opinion. The question needs to be asked. Why are we biopsying in the first place? Is the idea that we can somehow predict the future by the present? That's nonsense. The Gleason score is semi-useless when it comes to making decisions about how to manage your prostate. It is unneeded, misleading, and oftentimes wrong. Look, a Gleason score is simply a guy looking at a cell and trying to decide, a pathologist, granted, looking at cells and trying to describe them. What do they look like? You get 3 different pathologists, you get 3 different Gleason scores. Not needed. We now have the ability to look at the prostate gland. I love getting an MRI. Now, be cautious. Be cautious. I told you going to the urologist carries with it great risk. Right? Remember that old cliche? If the primary tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. I've heard this over and over again from my patients when I speak to them. The urologists are quick to move to biopsy. Why? Because it is their standard of care, because it's what they do, because they actually believe in it. And they believe in it in part because of the repetitive nature of the feedback they get. They haven't stopped. I mean, think about this. If new information threatens your livelihood, how anxious are you to incorporate that into your practice? I'm a family doc, board-certified osteopathic family physician. I come at this with a strong belief that the body is an incredible healing machine, and we've got to stop harming it in the spirit of trying to help it. Look, if there's something out there that's going to do you harm, but it has a wonderful success rate, hey, consider it. Consider it. But a PSA and prostate cancer, none of the above. Think about that. If the treatments that they had available for prostate cancer were so good, why would they delay? Why would they even consider this concept of watchful waiting, doing nothing, waiting to see what happens? Is the prostate going to go metastatic? Well, we need a biopsy to. You can't tell the future. Stop already with this misleading impetus toward a biopsy. We'll do a biopsy now. Active surveillance. We'll stick a needle in it. Question comes up all the time. Will that cause metastatic disease? Will it spread the cancer? Saith the urologist, no, there's no proof of that happening. Now, technically, that's a correct answer. Why? Because they never looked. Nobody ever stopped to look. Nobody really knows, do they? In medicine, we have research, like in science, there's research, and it's helpful. It's important. But you can't research everything, and you can't rely upon it for every decision you need to make. You need to use your intelligence. You need to use your intuition. You need to use your philosophy. The intelligence part. You have a tumor. You have cancer in the prostate. How do you know that? You've got elevated PSA. You're a certain age. You're above 50. And the MRI of the prostate looks like it's got nodules and tumors within it. You add those pieces up, it's safe to say there's some prostate cancer there. All right, what next? You stick a needle in it? Make it a bloody mess? Not a needle, multiple sticks. In order to do what? Confirm what you already know? I got news, guys. If your PSA is elevated and your MRI is abnormal, even if you had a normal negative prostate biopsy, they really wouldn't believe it. They'd want to do another one later. They're going to keep biopsying you until they find what they know is there. Here's so many problems with the biopsy. Yes, it can spread cancer, in my opinion, and there's lots of research-based evidence, case studies, small cohorts. There is not a definitive study on this topic, and there never will be, because the powers that be would be threatened by an outcome that validates the risk of metastatic process. Think about that. The whole industry would collapse. The whole biopsy industry would collapse. The guy who makes the needle, the guy who does the procedure. And in sequence, the whole harvesting the prostate gland would likely collapse. So the urology pathway, it's not wrong to do it, but it's potentially dangerous to you. You must go into that environment well-armed with your philosophy, with your information, with your personal resolve. Big problem out there. What do you do as an alternative? I've developed my protocol to answer that question, to fill that void. The book, I promise you it's coming soon. It's at the editors. And every time I think about it and I talk to you guys and I continue my research, I want to add a little more. They're starting to get mad at me. I got to stop. So if you have an appointment next week with the urologist, or look, the urologists they're by and large, are good people. They care about your health. They just don't have time to talk to you, right? Most of them. If you're a surgeon, any kind, you get paid to do stuff. You do not get paid to talk or sit around and listen. This is an incredibly complex and nuanced phenomenon in elevated PSA. What to do? Should you just do nothing and get sequential PSAs? Should you get a biopsy? Should you do an MRI? Okay, I'll square it up. Elevated PSA is a justification for a non-contrast biopsy. Now, why non-contrast? Non-contrast MRI. Did I say biopsy? Yikes. No biopsy. MRI, non-contrast. Why non-contrast? Because the contrast they use for MRIs is gadolinium. Now, can that harm you? Gadolinium is a heavy metal. We know for a fact it accumulates in the body and in the brain. I don't know about you, but I'd rather not have gadolinium in my brain. It doesn't belong there. Now we get to the issue of does it harm? I sigh. Medicine is so self-serving at times. They did a study to see if gadolinium caused harm. The study lasted 3 years, and they did not notice any decline in cognitive function. No memory loss, that they declared the gadolinium to be safe for use, that it does not cause harm. That is misleading and thoroughly inadequate. Whenever the brain gets insulted, injured, or damaged, there's about a 20-year lag between the trauma and the manifestation of its consequence. Those football players, by the way, chronic encephalitis, chronic traumatic encephalitis, I got a whole nother take on that. But suffice it to say that any injury to the brain, alcohol, free radical overload, chronic trauma, any injury to the brain, you got a 20-year lag before you actually start to forget where you put your car keys, right? So this 3-year study is semi-useless. I don't want gadolinium in my brain. I don't want it in your brain unless it's the absolute positively only way to go. Now, the radiologist and your urologist and your doctors will tell you the images are better with contrast. They're correct. It is better. But it's not clinically relevant. In my opinion, all the information we need to get from that MRI can be gotten without contrast. Okay, so we're clear about that. No contrast. You might have to fight for that, folks. I've had to advocate on behalf of some patients because the insurance company didn't want to pay to take the contrast out because the standard of care was with contrast. Yikes, right? The standard of care should never bulldoze common sense, people. Your common sense, and no biopsy. That is my advocacy against it. An MRI without contrast. Now we've got information. Now we've got objective evidence. Now we can contemplate what to do next. Now, if you have the type of urologist who guides you away from biopsy, if you have the type of a urologist who is contemplative and knowledgeable about alternative approaches to support your health, to do things to make your body inhospitable toward the progression of cancer, that's cool. Keep them around. If you have a urologist that you like and you want to have him monitor you, that's cool too. And if you have a urologist who is open-minded and endorses your philosophy, keep them on board. But if you have a urologist who says, well, we have to do, if you hear the word have to coming out of their mouth, that should be a red flag. You don't have to do anything. You can choose to do something with good information. Your PSA is elevated. We have to do a biopsy. No, you don't. In my opinion, the MRI always. Problem with the urologist ordering an MRI is that they just see that as a step toward the biopsy. They don't see that as an end unto itself. This idea of a targeted biopsy is utter nonsense. The idea that you can look at an MRI and then stick the needle where the cancer is defies what we know about how cancer behaves. It disseminates, it spreads on a cellular level like tentacles going out throughout the prostate gland. So you're just as likely to get misleading information as helpful information, and you're just as likely to spread the cancer. So back to the initial question then, who do you go to? I mean, I feel bad for you, for me, for us. Medicine has become so monopolistic, so dominant, that, quite frankly, when you have a high PSA, a lot of docs just, like a hot potato, baby, they just want to turf that responsibility. However, if you have a good, functionally based primary care doctor or nurse practitioner, or a very well-educated naturopath can fill in this role as well. That type of healthcare expert can help bring temperance, balance, and guidance to your journey. I really like nurse practitioners in this role. It's been my experience that they're, as a group, tend to be a little bit more open-minded, maybe because they felt the brunt of conventional medicine trying to dismiss their credibility. Maybe that's part of it. So beware of the dogma. Beware of the machine. Get off the treadmill. Stop and think. Step 1, stop and think. You can go to the urologist. In fact, not a bad idea to do it. In fact, I encourage it on many levels. Why? Because you need to hear the standard of care. It's reasonable for you to hear what the conventional take is, because you may choose it. And that's not wrong. It's not what I would advise. It's not what I would choose for myself or my patients. I would never have any man have his prostate gland removed. I would never have any man get radiation. I would never have any man get horribly castrated. No, this idea of testosterone annihilation to try to, it's just awful. Just awful. You will suffer at their hands. And for what gain? So just as an example of how information gets twisted, I'll leave you with this one study because I think it's emblematic of what can happen and how information gets disseminated. In 2004, a study was done called the TAX trial, TAX, and the question at hand was, in a man with metastatic prostate cancer, is chemotherapy better than a placebo? Is it helpful? The study concluded that men who received chemotherapy had a statistically significant extension of their lifespan. That trial then validated the role of chemotherapy with all of its horrible side effects, from nausea, vomiting, fatigue, to weight loss, to infections, right? Extended lifespan. Do you know how much it extended it in that study? Around 2 months. 2 months. What are we doing? Where's quality? What are we doing? Where's balance? What are we doing? Where's the time to reflect? Put your philosophy first. Get good information. Prostate cancer is a unique entity. An elevated PSA is not an emergency, and it's not a call to impulsive action. So take a breath, continue your study, continue your search. Do not fall into the hole of purely internet-based medicine, guys. It's out there. I know it is. I know you can order it up. Stuff can come from you from who knows where, India, China. Look, I'm an internationalist. I got nothing against my brothers throughout the world, but I ain't taking stuff that comes in the mail from no-name pharmacy out of nowhere. There are good doctors that can guide you on this path. So beware of the urologist. Beware of the misguided pathways on the internet. Know yourself. Get the information. Then take your time. There are doctors out there that think like I think. There are doctors out there that have time, will give you time. If they have, so how do you tell? If a guy has like the Prostate Biopsy Center of Omaha on his shingle, yikes, right? Is a person to avoid, in my opinion, right? You want to go to somebody with time who's going to be balanced. All right, the dangers of medicine, it's a real thing. Got to protect yourself, folks, and you can. It's a beautiful era. With artificial intelligence, with the internet, you can start to ask pointy, good, sharp, intelligent questions, and you can apply your own thought process to the journey you want to go down. Someday I'm going to die. Seems likely, although I'm an anti-aging specialist and I practice anti-aging medicine, I don't practice immortality medicine. But there's nothing about us biologically that requires us to age and decay before we die. Stay strong, be vital, fight cancer like a man, live like a man. Do not let them take that from you in the absence of compelling, overwhelming, good evidence of benefit. And it's just not there. All right, gang, I'll talk to y'all next time. Thanks for tuning in and being part of this journey with me.